Sitting at the forefront of most NASA employees' minds is the thought of going back to the moon. It's been nearly a half-century since the world took its last steps atop the lunar surface, and it seems it'll more than crest 50 years before we do it again. NASA had a tentative 2024 deadline set for returning to the moon, established in 2019. After that, however, many thought it virtually impossible to get the technology built and tested to get humans back up there in time. And, well, it definitely seems to push farther from that date nearly every day. In a conversation with reporters in November, NASA Administrator Bill Nelson mentioned that a return to the moon would likely be no earlier than 2025. While that year-long delay isn't too significant in the grand scheme of things, it's just another delay in a long stream of constant issues. NASA's plans to bring SpaceX tech to the moon continue to be moved back, with the Inspector General saying it'll likely be delayed even further. But with that incredibly uplifting news, why? Well, it seems many people point pretty aggressively towards Blue Origin, billionaire Jeff Bezos' aerospace company. That's because the company's lawsuit against NASA has continued to drag things out and make sure we're not making it back to the moon anytime soon. The lawsuit happens to be thanks to SpaceX's dominating plans and future aspirations, which have now become a vital part of NASA's plans to bring astronauts to the lunar surface. Current ideas have astronauts riding in an Orion capsule aboard a space launch system before being transferred to a Starship to be taken to the moon for a safe landing. This Starship, generally designed as a lunar lander and temporary base, led SpaceX to be the sole recipient of a $2.9 billion contract. SpaceX beat out the national team, built from Dynetics, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Draper, and of course, Blue Origin. This ragtag group of legacy and young aerospace companies had what they thought to be the best way to take astronauts down to the lunar surface, alongside the best way to earn that contract. However, it wasn't enough to beat out SpaceX's more efficient, more powerful, and more inexpensive solution, which led the company to win all $2.9 billion of contract material. Nonetheless, that didn't sit well with the national team, giving Blue Origin and Dynetics the chance to file a lawsuit against NASA, claiming bias and who knows what else. While NASA, the U.S. government, the Government Accountability Organization, and SpaceX protested this lawsuit, Blue Origin kept coming back, eventually leading to a shutdown of the entire relationship between SpaceX and NASA. Well, that and a 7-month litigation period where the company couldn't communicate with NASA whatsoever. So instead of beating the odds and pushing humans back to the moon by 2024, we're looking at 2025, with a growing likelihood of more significant delays. And while Blue Origin isn't the entire reason behind the delay, they definitely haven't made it much easier. After all, 7 months of completely lost work and potential isn't beneficial to developing lunar landers and plans to bring humans to a place they haven't been in nearly 50 years. Of course, that's an additional issue atop the big one that has plagued NASA for a decade: the Space Launch System. In what's rumored to have been $23 billion worth of R&D from the past 10 years, the SLS is NASA's Encore rocket, intended to become the successor to the Space Shuttle. There are plans for decades of use, hundreds if not thousands of total missions, trips to Mars, massive telescope launches, and so much more. However, in its current state, it's far from ready. Instead of a futuristic rocket with the ability to create more money than is being spent on it, the SLS has turned into a hole in the United States government's wallet. As a result, billions of dollars have found themselves pushed into a project without actual physical existence. Rumors of billions in masked money spent, years of failed anti-competitive behavior, and failed experiments have one of the costliest American failures. Ironically, none of this likely would have happened if NASA had instead poured more of their trust into SpaceX. The company is leading in rocket technology, launches, reusable tech, and much more that NASA has tried not too hard to be a part of. For example, think of SpaceX's Starship. The future vehicle has hopes to be near completely reusable, cheap, and easy to launch. All things that NASA hopes to do with SLS. Oh, and some prototypes have existed for less time than the Space Launch System program and can already do more. And they're reusable. So, with Blue Origin dragging out an already extended R&D period, with litigation and NASA spending billions of dollars on a program that isn't too great in comparison to some cheaper reusable competitive ideas, there are quite a few issues right now. However, there are also some issues on SpaceX's end. Although the company's tried its hardest to push Starship into orbit already, there's some ironic regulatory approval that's also yet to land. Unfortunately, the FCC's lack of yes for SpaceX's first orbital flight means that we're treated with more restrictions. After all, how will SpaceX or NASA know Starship is currently on the right path if the company can't test the actual rocket? NASA has some issues getting on the right track, and without being able to try things, SpaceX might find its way right alongside the agency. And without SpaceX's Starship, there's no lunar landing and potentially no launch to the moon. As mentioned, NASA's current moon landing plans with the Artemis program use Starship to ferry astronauts from lunar orbit to the surface. Without Starship, there's no ferrying. Plus, with the way SLS continues to look, there might also be no trip up to space. SLS is already way too expensive, has virtually nothing going right, and almost exclusively exists to prove that NASA can do things in-house, which, again, might not work. By now, we're left with a trip to head to the moon, complete with a lack of transportation to space, transportation to the lunar surface, and a safe touchdown on Regolith. All that makes it a little easier to see how Artemis is being delayed even more. Still, there's even more that could go wrong moving forward. We're dealing with ongoing lawsuits and pushback from Blue Origin, issues arising from SLS, a growing dislike from the government towards SpaceX, and more significant delays from a more significant list of problems. Without a guarantee for this to clear up, it's a good thing that NASA is being as generic as they can about the information involving the whole ordeal. Hopefully, the chaos and issues push the agency to make some changes, looking for promising alternatives to lead Artemis back on track. We don't know whether that will come from SpaceX's creations or inspiration taken from the company, meaning we'll just have to wait. Like everyone's been doing for the past 50 years. It's honestly a sort of irony, considering that so much effort and money has gone directly into bringing Americans back to the moon. Plus, with growing geopolitical pressure and competition from the East, it's shocking that the US hasn't done whatever possible to push Artemis to the forefront of its schedule. That's even alongside the sudden announcement of Space Force, growing space aspirations under the Trump administration, and general interest in building companies and ambitions presented by SpaceX. You'd think that would be enough to bring us back to the moon, but it looks as though it'll take more than that for Blue Origin to drop its case. Who knows? Maybe there will be another Sputnik-like scare deemed dangerous enough to make the final push. Only time and money will tell, although obviously not very well. One would think decades of R&D, $9.3 billion for Orion, $23 billion for SLS, and the total $23 billion in NASA's budget would tell a positive story. But it's not quite there yet. Fortunately, however, we still have the possibility of promising companies like SpaceX and goals like Starship's flight to Mars. So, while Artemis grows further away in what seems to be every press event, we know the private industry continues to truck ahead towards their ideas. And so, what do you think? Is NASA's further delay of Artemis another roadblock in it and SpaceX's lunar goals? Or will the power of Elon Musk push the company ahead? Either way, it's obviously a big thing for both the agency and SpaceX, even if NASA has more to lose. As such, do you think NASA will find in its heart and budget to drop SLS in favor of a NASA-SpaceX system? Or are we set for eternal delays and lawsuits? Let us know your thoughts below, and make sure to check out our other videos on Artemis and SpaceX while you're at it. And so, like that, we'll see you all next time.